Well, you mentioned him. Let's go Toronto, because that's another team that's projected pretty low here. Um, so 25 wins for the Raptors last year. This is another one that, like, I was kind of shocked that the total was that low. Maybe I shouldn't have been, but I just didn't remember them being quite that bad. I guess they were very much like two different teams last year, so that's part of it. And in fact, just filter the basically season performance to after mid-February. So let's just say, basically post-trade deadline, kind of post-All-Star break territory. Worst point differential in the league for Toronto. So and also no Scotty Barnes at that, from I think almost all of that, right? I forget exactly when he went out, but that was a big deal. So
between him and Jalen Johnson missing games, that was a bummer for my most improved player ballot.
Most improved really went through it last year. It really struggled. So maybe here's the question. Does Barnes being back healthy with this kind of revamped, quickly Barrett, Grady Dick's going to play more, does that make enough of a difference to take what was the worst point differential in the league for 2 months and get you over 25 wins? I think so. And again, like, they're incentivized to not win a lot of games. I just don't know how you steer into the skid that hard to get down to 24, because I do think there's a fair amount of talent on this roster, and a lot of it actually I think should get better. So where are you on them?
Yeah, I went with better as well. And it actually, when I went into this, I thought they were going to be harder, but it was just like, I looked at the minutes they played with Barnes, Quickly, RJ, and Jakob Poeltl last year. They outscored teams by 11.5 points per 100 possessions.
That's a good lineup.
That's a good lineup. And I have questions about the entire rest of their roster. I've come around on Grady Dick with the close that he had to the season. I don't know how much they're going to lean on Jacoby Walter. What does Bruce Brown's role look like? It feels like, and how much is Kelly? I'd like to see them get to lineups, like even spacier lineups where Kelly Olynyk is playing, but are those going to hold up defensively? So I basically have questions about everyone outside of their top four, but like, just having those top four together, and then Scotty Barnes is going to get better. I think at least one of Quickly and Barrett will continue to improve. And if you buy into the shooting and or finishing improvement of Barrett in Toronto, it's kind of hard not to go over. My concern would be, does this become a team that decides, well, we're not good enough to do anything special. The only person we're actually married to on this roster is Scotty Barnes. And so, look, Emmanuel Quickly's on the trade block in January or something to see. So yeah. I just haven't ruled. I would bet against it just because the way they prioritized Quickly and Barrett in the Anunoby trade. But I'm also like, I don't think they're bolted down to anyone except Scotty Barnes on this roster. And that, if you're Jakob Poeltl, of course, if you're Bruce Brown, but if you're Emmanuel Quickly, if you're RJ Barrett, I think they would move them if there were offers, like reasonable offers out there for them.
Yeah, I think another factor that we kind of touched on for several other teams is just like, if the Raptors' intention was to be like exceptionally bad, that has to start at game one, because the competition for being that bad is pretty fierce between like the Washingtons, even the Detroits, the Brooklyns, and we have to include West teams too, because we're just talking about lottery odds. Like, the Blazers are going to be terrible. Utah, who knows, but could steer into it.
What's going on in Utah?
Well, Toronto's a little bit like that to me, because a little bit, because like, there's scenarios where, it's like, I don't know, it's mid-December and Toronto's like 6th in the East or something. Like, that would be, they'd be like, way over their heads at that point, and no one would expect that to continue. But they could find themselves in a position where it's like, man, we got to do something. And I don't know what that trade is, or who you shut down to get a lot worse on purpose, and how much sort of patience there would be for that from guys like Barnes and Quickly and whatever, guys that think like, hey, I got a real roles now. Like, it's my time. Like, I want to show out. You're telling me I got to shut it down. Like, that wouldn't go over well. But they're just too good, and they would have to try to. The tank effort would be like too egregious for this team for them to get under 25. I think so. I think we're in agreement there on the over or better.
I think this will be an easy one. Let's go to Boston, coming off just a monster 64-win campaign. And again, we're talking binary wins and losses, regular season only. They will probably be my pick to win the title. They're not winning 64 games again. And I think you could point, if you actually want to get into an argument about it, there's two things that I'm going to rest on. Porzingis probably isn't going to be playing a bunch before 2025. And so that has a trickle-down effect on your big man rotation. You're relying on Luke Cornett for more minutes in the middle of the season. You're relying on Neemias Queta for more minutes in the middle of the season. The other thing, so you just come off this championship run. Granted, it wasn't a super fatiguing championship run, but like now you have Jason Tatum, Derek White, and Drew Holiday are all on the Olympic roster that is going probably, as we record this, they've not played the game to get to the gold medal round, but they're probably going there. That's just a lot of basketball for all these guys. And the other thing is okay, you won 64, getting to 65 is that's a lot of victories.
Well, that's just like, yeah, we probably should have looked this up, but like what percentage of NBA teams historically have won 65 or more games in a season? It's like vanishingly small. Just it's really, really hard to be that good over a season. I think especially after the strain of the long playoff run and the difficult summer and stuff. So you kind of get into the non-analytical, like maybe a little championship hangover, maybe a little bit like and this is a real thing, by the way. They should know they don't need the number one seed like that. Right. I think much more so than anybody else who might actually want it in the East. The Celtics are like, they should feel very confident, and this will cost them games probably, that like we'll turn it on when we need to. I think they are justified in feeling that way about themselves. The other thing is not only Porzingis, like he's going to miss all that time, and I guarantee you they're going to be super careful with him when he does come back and is playing. Like he will play less minutes per game and actual like there's no way he's going to play back to back. Al Horford is a million years old. He has to be played less, especially coming off that deep run. So yeah, like there's just no, like, what is the argument for them being better? Maybe flip it and put it that way. Like, how do you do that?
That the East is just not as good as we expected. That let's look at the teams that have some significant new additions where it's, like New York and Philadelphia are the same or worse for some reason. It turns out New York really, Mitchell Robinson's injured and they really miss Isaiah Hartenstein, or Philly, Joel Embiid's injured again. And that kind of goes off the rails from there. But that's really, the Celtics are on paper the best team in the league. I think the Thunder are the only team that has a reasonable case to be put over them in any sort of best team in the league discussion right now. But 65 wins is, and they shouldn't care about winning that. Like it's just, you mentioned it already.
They don't need it.
Yeah. So I just can't. What's more likely, that Jaylen Brown requests a trade because he's mad that Derek White made the Olympic roster, or that Boston wins 65 games next year?
Jaylen Brown trade request for sure, because they can't win.
Hey, we could go the real sports talk show route and just be like, well, is there discord brewing? Jaylen Brown didn't seem happy. He blamed Nike.
Is this team ready to fall apart internally? Probably not.
This is all to say they should be your pick to come out of the Eastern Conference. I'm just not betting on them to win 65 plus games.
Yeah. All right, let's do the Cleveland Cavaliers. I would start by noting that this team won 55 games 2 years ago, and the roster is arguably better and perhaps more secure because just about everybody who really matters has big new contracts, and there's no more who's going to be here, who's not. Got a new coach, probably an upgrade. Their best four guys were plus 2.7 last year, but played less than 1,000 possessions. They were plus 10.2 and about twice that many in 22-23. That's where those 55 wins came from. I think they're going to be better. I think they could be a lot better. I just don't know, unless you're going to cite injuries, why you'd say they're going to win 47 games or fewer.
Yeah, and look, I think it might be fair to cite injuries at this point, or if you point to Darius Garland looking kind of awkward last year, maybe it wasn't kind of the byproduct of him getting hit in the face every 5 seconds. So there are reasons, the dual big stuff. Are they going to have to heavily stagger? They probably will, and Kenny Atkinson will figure it out. But like, they're not out of moves. Jared Allen could be traded if it's not working out, and they want to go the sort of put Mobley as our full-time center type deal. They have so many options, but I still kind of believe that the top four can just work out together because of what we saw in year one when Evan Mobley was a worse version of himself. And like Darius Garland was better, but like Darius Garland can get back to that point. So I think they'll pretty easily be better. And I actually look at them as the team. It feels like them in Milwaukee, but even more so them, because we talked more collectively about the Cavs need to trade one of like so-and-so, or will Donovan Mitchell ask her out. It just feels like they're being overlooked more than any could-be contender should. And Milwaukee has some of that. Again, I feel like people have slept on, but they have Chris Middleton coming off ankle surgeries, and just their guys are getting older. All of Cleveland's players aren't even in their prime yet, or they're firmly in their prime. And so they're also just like, have you ever seen the top four of a really good roster locked down for so long when there's only one contract as of right now that would be considered like not the 25% max deal? And so like that's like they are built to sustain if they're good
Mhm.
too, which is kind of scary here.
I just think like I, even if you're not convinced that Atkinson will figure out ways to use all four guys that are better than Bickerstaff did, like the ill fit between Allen and Mobley, and to some extent Garland and Mitchell, like that's a playoff problem. That's not something that I think kills you against you know, the Bulls, you know, in January or whoever. Like it's a problem down the road. Like I think probably until Atkinson proves it's not, but I'm not concerned about that stuff at all in terms of their regular season win total. If anything, it's a bonus just because we do know that Allen or Mobley can be the lone big, Garland or Mitchell can be the lone playmaker. Like that, it all works.
And the other thing is, I think because the strides Mobley specifically made, I think during his lone big minutes, without looking at the actual numbers, like just off of remembrance, eye testing it, that's like now you could just say, oh, well, we'll just now we know we're going to have 48 minutes of great play in the middle. And so we have to heavily stagger them. Then so be like, you might just be better balanced off for that. And I think if you're trying to look for an issue with the core four, I think the problems will come when it comes to crunch time.
Yeah.
And are we going one big like they did a lot of times last year? If Garland and Mitchell aren't meshing and defensively, like you're not necessarily holding up, and there's a guy at the point of attack who's really like killing you, and who knows if Isaac Okoro's on this roster, maybe he'll resign by the time it comes out, or maybe Danny Ainge will do one of those late summer offer sheets like he did for Paul Reed last year. So I like that would be the level of concern, which is this feels like a 50-win team to me. And you could probably, I probably look at 4 teams in the East and say, I think they're going to win 50 games. And this would be one of them.
Yeah. And just again, they've done it. They've won 50 with this team, you know, like 2 years ago. I just don't see how they, barring injury, obviously, you know, caveat every time.